Hi, and welcome back to Thone's Psalms, Nibbles number 85, Restoration of God's People in the Land of Promise. We're going to be reading from Psalms 85, verses 1 through 7. Lord, you have been favorable to your land. You have brought back the captivity of Jacob. You have forgiven the iniquity of your people. You have covered all their sin. Selah. You have taken away all your wrath. You have turned from the fierceness of your anger. Restore us, O God of our salvation, and cause your anger toward us to cease. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger to all generations? Will you not revive us again, that your people may rejoice in you? Show us your mercy, Lord, and grant us your salvation. Wow. A really great closing line there. We're talking about new freedom. Now, why is this in the Bible? God's people thanking the Lord for their return. That's the main reason. The communications, we should never forget the source of our joy. You know, these old songs about that joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? And so on. That's how we should feel when we think about the Lord and meditate on His goodness to us. Application to my life. I'm just giving a little background here. The 70 years predicted in Jerusalem, in Jeremiah, has passed, and they have returned. Now is the time to get a relationship with God back again. It is though that the first three verses here were sung by the choir of the temple. That's the general thinking among those who study such things. But then starting in verse 4, people recognize that it's not just the freedom of the country, but each individual person being freed by this act of return. We see this in the use of us 6 times in the final 4 verses. They ask with prayerful passion, restore us. While they were captive in Babylon, they had heard Ezekiel speak about the dry bones. You remember that story. And now they were asking God to similarly rebirth their families, their farms, and their homes that they pray for now. So they felt like they were free, and sometimes they were when they were living in the Promised Land after things settled down from all the wars that took over the Promised Land. And they considered that to be the freedom of God, and in some instances it was, and in other instances it was, there was no freedom, that the Philistines were in control, or the Amalekites, or the, there were so many different groups who came into control at one time or another. But that's the kind of freedom that they tasted, was that they were free to be themselves and to run their farms, to go to the temple, to do the things that they felt like were normal daily activities. But then, when Jeremiah had told them they're going to be going 70 years, and indeed they were, and more, so, for many, they then remember, while they were in captivity, But there was this prophet named Ezekiel who had a prophecy about God raising dry bones back to life. This is one of the great analogies of the Old Testament, really, is that the dry bones represented the people of Israel. And so now they were asking God to do exactly that, to take the dry bones of their history and reinvigorate them and therefore reform the nation as families, as farms, and as cities and houses and all of those things. And this was their prayer at this time. God says, although I sometimes work through leaders and governments, I prefer to work through individual people. And so this was, the first 3 verses was the established religion singing in the temple. And of course that was a temple of God and was a wonderful thing. But even more than that, God prefers to have these personal relationships with people and help them and protect them and have them honor Him. So that's what this is about. Finally, my personal response is, Lord, thank you for giving us a direct line of communications with you. And we'll talk more about that a little later, I think. For right now, see you next time.